Good morning. It's 11 o'clock Dubai time, 9 o'clock in Malta, where I'm sitting. We'll just leave a couple of minutes to make sure that everybody has time to settle down and get their technology sorted. We'll be using the chat quite a bit today, so get your fingers ready. Perhaps let's start to get a feel for who is in the room today. Who of you are running an organization already? So dealing with the trials and tribulations of managing and leading people. Show of hands. Yeah, trying to run a startup isn't easy. Absolutely. Hopefully after today, you'll have some insight into how to make it a little bit easier. Who of you is thinking about entrepreneurship? Maybe he is employed and wants to jump out of the rat race and start their own business. So it seems that most of you are already entrepreneurs. Good. We recently set up our business in Dubai as well. So any help or advice from a client perspective, please do reach out. We'll be sharing my LinkedIn connections later, as well as our websites. So we've gone through that process of setting up in Dubai with Creative Zone. They've been extremely helpful. So if you want some insights from our side, please feel free to reach out. Okay, accelerators, interesting. Good to see we've got people from quite a few places around the world. So welcome everyone. Let me get going. It's 5 past. So my name is Nathan Farrugia. I am the license holder and representative of Vistage in Malta and the Mediterranean and also in the Middle East. We also own a company called Up Your Level. That's the website. We'll be sharing it later. And Up Your Level is a mix between executive coaching, insights and advisory, and academy, so leadership development. And our goal essentially is to try and support business leaders like yourselves to be able to raise their game. However, we do things slightly differently. So our approach is very much exploring how we can support individuals change the way that they think to be able to stop the blocks that hold them back. So what we find in with our clients, and we've worked for 20 odd years with clients from all around the world, from the US, Europe, Asia, big corporates like Microsoft and HSBC, but also small startups, perhaps like some of you on this call. And what we found is that most of the time, the way of demonstrating performance is really limited by the way that people think, the way that people behave, and how they act together as teams. So what I want to try and do in this very short time that we have is give you some insights into how you might want to look at these aspects of your organization from a leadership and a management perspective. Now, obviously, leadership and management is such a vast subject. In themselves, you can write MBAs and PhDs on each of those subjects. So in 1 hour, we're going to have to narrow that a little bit. However, obviously, do keep in touch with us and communicate with us later, and we'll be able to have perhaps other calls or discussions on how we might help you on your entrepreneurial journey. So I started out in healthcare. I've led and built healthcare clinics in my earlier days, and then moved into hospitality, and then spent many years working in the nonprofit sector, helping raising funds for charity, as well as organizing and managing nonprofit organizations both here and in London. And more recently moved into tech and ran a tech company, an established tech company. And we've recently now started our Vistage journey in the Middle East, starting with Dubai. And Vistage essentially is a network of CEOs that come together once a month and help each other solve problems. So it's a peer advisory group. We have quite a few organizations already in our membership, and we're obviously looking to grow and expand. So let's start with the basic premise. Leadership and management are two very different things. Management is really about systems. It's about understanding what you're trying to achieve from a strategic perspective after you've set your vision for what you want to achieve, and then trying to find ways to be able to create controls or processes that will allow you to become more efficient and effective. So management is a very useful thing, and the more complex your organization gets, the more management you need. So if you're a tiny startup, maybe you're a single owner founder, you're trying to manage your time and your calendar, essentially. Obviously, as you start to employ people or start outsourcing, you need to start managing those processes. How do you get what you need from the people around you in a way that is organized, systemized, process-driven, and therefore efficient and effective? So when we think about management, we're looking at business processes, we're looking at understanding the measurements that we want to measure within our organization to understand impact, and also to be able to track change over time. Management helps us because we can look at history, the historical progress of the company, for example, like our accounts, to be able to see how our business is going. So these are management aspects of running a business. For yourselves as leaders, I think leadership probably is more relevant. Leadership is different from management because leadership is directional, right? So typically it's not understanding and organizing the status quo, but looking at the future. It's inspirational because you're trying to bring people to follow you, all right? If you are on your own, you are not necessarily a leader. If you have people that follow you, then you become a leader. So a follower makes a leader. So leading people and leading change and leading, in your market requires different skill sets than management. It requires creativity. It requires critical thinking. It requires adaptation and agility. And these skill sets mostly are personal. So they are related to us and who we are and our personality and the way that we behave and the way that we act. So if we think about leadership, we perhaps think about politicians, or we think about business leaders that we see in the media, perhaps nonprofit leaders that have made an impact or are making an impact in society. What makes these people different to the rest of us is that they have a vision, they understand their purpose, why they get out of bed in the morning to do what they do, and they are usually very good at communicating that in a way that inspires other people to want to follow that journey. So if you think about your role as a leader within your organization, the aspect of inspiration and vision is extremely important. If you don't have clarity on what you want to achieve and where you want to take your business, it's going to be very difficult for you to bring talent on board who want to go through the discomfort of hard work to be able to help you achieve your goals. So what I want to look at is, how can we as leaders become better at what we do in a business context? What holds us back? And what can we do around us to be able to build the right systems in place from a management perspective that actually support leadership? So we're going to break this session into 3 parts. The first part, we're going to go through some laws of leadership that we've come up with that we'll share with you. And this will also come as a PDF that we will send you by email with the email you registered for this webinar later on. Then we'll look at a methodology that we use with our clients, which is the FIRE model, and we'll explore that. And then the third part is going to be a little bit of a Q&A to try and give you some real sense of answering the questions that are burning for you, that you need to try and get some sort of answers and make some sense of. So that's the way that we're going to divide this. Like I said, we have short time, so it's going to be quite straightforward and fast. And if it is a bit too fast, I do apologize in advance, but please reach out after and we'll try and find a way to have a conversation that will allow you to be able to understand a little bit more some of the points that we're going to try and get across. So we're going to start. So let me just quickly look at the Q&A. Okay. All right, we really have some questions coming in. We will look at those a little bit later, but let's start with sharing the screen. So Vistage it's a global organization. We have 45,000 CEOs and business owners that are members of Vistage around the world in 35 countries. So what I'm going to share with you today is insight from those people. What do they feel as leaders who have gone through the journey of entrepreneurship and, yes, made mistakes and learned from those mistakes? What do they feel are the most important things that a leader today should have in their toolbox to be able to be successful? And Vistage and this presentation really talk about these 7 laws, these 7 principles that we need to look at as leaders ourselves in order to be the best version of ourselves leading organizations. We talk about the life of climb, of the journey to the summit, because we know it's always an uphill struggle. We also know that getting to the top of a mountain is never a straight line. Sometimes you need to take detours to the side to be able to find a better way. And this metaphor is very similar to entrepreneurial life. It's never a straight line. You have a plan and then things go wrong. And this is normal. And this resilience that we get from actually facing these challenges makes us better. In fact, the best leaders are the ones typically that would have had most difficulty in achieving their success because they've learned through the mistakes they've made or the problems they've encountered. So I think, an overarching principle here is you need to get out of your comfort zone and you need to accept that actually problems are challenges, and overcoming challenges will actually make you a better version of the leader that you want to be. So embrace discomfort, embrace challenge, embrace change. Let's look at these 7 laws. Now, I warn you in advance, these slides are quite wordy, which means they've got a lot of content on them. That's why we're sending you the PDF later. So I just want to sort of talk around the main principles without going into too much detail. So imagine yourself climbing these steps and looking at this journey that you are on of leadership, the vision that you see that you want to achieve, and the people around you that you want to inspire. There are 7 laws that allow you to be able to stay on track, even when times are tough. And we're going to go through those 7 laws. The first being that sometimes it's tempting for us to take shortcuts. And we must make sure that we go the full route to be able to get what we need in the best possible way. Now, this talks about sustainability. It talks about building today something that will last in the long term. Yes, we may already have an idea that we want to exit our business and sell it in the future, but someone buying your business in the future wants to buy something that is sustainable. So you must always think about building for the long term. And this means that we should reject shortcuts. If you think about leaders as corporate athletes, if I want to run a marathon, I need to put the miles in. I need to wake up every day early and go for my long runs and make those longer and longer. It requires hard work and determination. So leaders need to be role models in showing that hard work pays off and that you are ready to be able to go through the difficulties yourself rather than try and find ways to escape or circumvent problems that you're facing. So we'll talk about responsibility later, roles and responsibilities later in the second part of this workshop. But this is important. When you've decided, and most of you already have decided to take a leadership journey, you know you are going in for a tough time. And that's fine. Embrace that. Reject the shortcuts. Second part, most leaders especially in startups, get stuck in the detail. Perhaps they don't have a team yet, or their team is relatively small, so they're having to do everything. They're managing, they're recruiting, they're selling, they're prospecting, they're doing the marketing and the sales at the same time. This is a very, very busy time for a startup leader who's trying to do all of this. And as you start to recruit more specialists to help you, someone in HR, someone in marketing, someone in sales, you then focus more and more on your leadership. However, this is no excuse for you not finding quiet time to think. It's extremely important for leaders to be able to get headspace, which means you need to be able to step away from the day-to-day hustle and bustle, from the busyness that comes with running a business, for you to be able to reflect and think. This isn't something that you wait until you get to the summit of your metaphorical mountain to stop and look back and reflect, but to do this at every stage. In fact, what we recommend is that at least once a month, you spend a half day, if not a full day, away from the office, thinking, working on your strategy, reflecting on what's working and what's not working, finding time to develop yourself, read a book, attend a webinar, be curious about ways of doing things differently. It's also important that you find the space to reflect, especially when you are busy, because that's when you probably need the most mental clarity. The more pressure you are under, the more of an empty mind you need to be able to have all these options and choices that you are faced with in order to make better decisions. If you want to practice mindfulness or meditation or do yoga or exercise, these are good things to do on a daily basis. However, you also need to find a longer period of time during your time, particularly, as I said, on a monthly basis, if not more frequently, to be able to get away from it all and think. What I like to do is write. Write down what's working, what's not working, what needs to change. Think about the things that irritate you or annoy you or are causing you stress, and explain those in a written form, because when you write things down, this brain dump allows you to be able to objectively look at the problem from a distance, rather than it being in your head like a voice that is going on loop. So second law is create space to work on your business, not in your business. Okay? Find time to work on your business, not in your business. Third law, you need to challenge your thinking. So when you are the sole decision maker, if you are a single owner business, the danger is that you have blind spots, which means that you won't see problems coming because you have one brain and two pairs of eyes. So that limits your ability to think differently. If you have business partners, that's great. Create opportunities for you to use them as sounding boards. Have brainstorming sessions or discussions. Blue sky thinking is a good way of thinking about new and fresh perspectives of problems that you are facing. Now, some good signs of this are when you find that the problem is repeating itself. If there is a problem that keeps coming back, say, for example, you've recruited people and they keep leaving and you have to keep re-recruiting, you have to be careful you don't get caught on that hamster wheel. You have to step off and say, okay, what's the root cause here? How can I think from a different perspective to have a new viewpoint on the situation. The biggest difficulty here is our ego. Yeah. Now, most of us, if we have taken the jump, we have courage. We are strong in our convictions that what we are doing is the right thing. And that's why we've decided to perhaps leave an organization to start our own business, or we've decided not to join an organization to be our own boss. That requires an element of ego, which isn't a bad thing. But we also need to understand that sometimes that can be self-limiting. We don't have all the information at hand for us to make the best decisions. It's actually impossible for a CEO to know everything within their organization. If you look at larger organizations, most CEOs are making decisions with about 10% of the information they need to make a correct decision. 10%, that's tiny. So what do? They surround themselves with remarkable people, a C-suite, a management team, a heads of department that can do much more of the deeper dives in getting the information that the CEO needs to then be able to make a decision. However, if you're a small organization, you may not have the luxury to have a C-suite. You can't afford it yet. Remarkable people are people that you respect, that you can access, and that can be helpful to you as a sounding board to be able to bounce off ideas, to give you a fresh perspective. There are different ways of looking at challenging your thinking. Lateral thinking, a famous Maltese philosopher came up with the concept of lateral thinking, Edward de Bono. He has some really interesting techniques and methodologies, if you want to look these up, on how to look at a problem from a different perspective. So these are things that good leaders do and do on a regular basis. 4, this is one of my favorites, curiosity. Not just yourself in being curious, but also encouraging the people around you, maybe your fellow board members or founders or your employees, to look at problems from a fresh perspective. They require an element of curiosity. Now, what does this mean? It means that when we are asking them questions about problems, we need to make sure the questions are the right questions. You may be very tempted to talk about what we should do in a situation where you are facing a challenge. My recommendation is that you talk about what you could do. When you talk about what you could do, you are creating options. When you talk about what you should do, you've narrowed it down to one. And that might miss out other choices that actually would be better for your business. So creativity is extremely important, and the language you use with your people around how to think differently, how to look at options, how to see what we could do rather than should do, is a very, very important tool as leaders that are leading teams. We need to ask empowering questions that help people find their own solutions. We want to empower them rather than blame for mistakes made. And we want to be able to allow for creativity, because creativity can be quite messy. All right, so what I mean by this is that when you're trying different things to see what might work differently, you're going to break stuff. As a leader, you need to be patient. Sometimes to build a product, Thomas Edison, on his 1000th try of making the light bulb, he said when it broke, well, I've learned 999 ways of how not to make a light bulb. So this trial and error, this failing forwards is important, because this creativity allows you to get breakthroughs. But you may try 100 things and finally one works. Don't stop. Keep trying new things. Stoke curiosity. 5, decision-making. Essentially, this is what leaders do. Yeah. Now, we might empower our team to be able to make decisions. We might try and delegate responsibility to others to be able to make those decisions. But really, the buck stops with us. We need to be the person that has the final say. The responsibility is ours. Now, we can just do this on the fly, which means that if your personality is one that is decisive, you are assertive, and you are happy to make decisions, you may be too quick in making decisions. If, on the other hand, you get stuck in the detail, you want to analyze things to make sure you get it perfectly right, that might take too long to make decisions. So our decision-making style is very personal to us. So therefore, we need to have something that supports our decision-making process that is a bit more structured. So first of all, we need to understand how we prioritize, what decisions we need to take, which are the ones that are most important, then the ones that are most urgent, and then the ones that we can let other people make decisions for them to be able to grow and learn. So this is a process that we need to be able to fall back on, because we may be tempted simply to relay our personal style of decision making rather than perhaps what might be better or more sustainable for your business. So here is a little tool of what is urgent and important that you can use. As I said, I will send this PDF to you later. And this little matrix will allow you to be able to determine what decisions you need to take, what needs to get priority, and what perhaps can be delegated to others or even eliminated. There are some decisions that actually aren't for now and can be postponed. And there are some decisions that actually need to be taken today for long-term benefit. Those are the most important ones. Yes, we have urgency. Yes, we have to make decisions on the fly to firefight. But the most important decisions are the ones that will affect us in the long term. And those we need to take with a still mind. 6, find a trusted guide. Especially in organizations that are still fledgling, you need to figure out who you are going to have as a mentor. Who is going to be your sounding board? It may be more than one. I like to talk about remarkable people, people in your life that have some sort of experience that you lack. Write those down. Write the names of the people that you want to get in touch with. Talk about their special strengths that you don't have that would be useful to you, and ask their permission. And what you'll find is that most people are generous with their time. They want to help. Failing that, engage a coach. Find a coach that has leadership experience, that has run businesses before, that has been through your pain. And if you find someone who has been through your pain, they are going to give you a much more reliable set of insights than someone who's only understood leadership from a theoretical perspective. So it's important that you surround yourself with people who have been there and done that, who have made mistakes and learned, and who can share and are willing to give non-judgmental advice to you for you to have perhaps some more options on any situation that you are facing. Vistage is a members organization, and our Vistage members get together once a month to brainstorm, to get that headspace, and also to challenge each other. That's one simple way. So joining a mastermind group is one way of getting access to people who you can trust that will be able to help you on your journey. But at least one person should be someone that you can use as a sounding board. 7, for me, probably one of the most important things, as I said earlier, to be a leader, you must have followers. Otherwise, you are an entrepreneur that is on your own, you're self-employed. So when we think about leadership, what we're trying to do here is raise others up. So in the context of ascending by helping others, what we're saying is that to get to the top of this mountain, that is this journey, we need a team. Now, a team doesn't have to be employees if you can't yet afford them. Maybe you're still too small. It could be partners. It could be outsourced. It could be friends and family. You need to surround yourself with people that are going to be on your journey with you, that can help you, that can critically think and give you feedback and perhaps give you insights or say a word around perhaps a situation or a decision that you are about to take, for you to be able to make sure that you are having a wider view of things. When you're helping other people grow, you're actually improving yourself. So for me, the best way to learn is actually to relay information to someone. So if I read a book and it's a really interesting concept and I want to try and remember it, the first thing I do is I go and teach my team the same concept, because when I teach that, I automatically remember it better and become better at articulating it. So you need to spend time coaching and training your own team. You need to spend time coaching and training good clients. You need to spend time coaching and training the people around you for them to become better, which then allows them to take more responsibility off your back so you can do what you're supposed to be doing, which is take the business forward. There is absolutely no way you are going to be successful without the right people around you. And when I mean the right people, there are 2 ways of looking at this, and I think both are required in business today. One is competence. So is the person right for the job that you are expecting of them? Do they have the competence and the competencies required for the responsibility that you are going to give them? So on one hand, we need to look at competence, either their skill set, yeah, the soft skills, the hard skills. The hard skills perhaps are the technical skills they require for the job. The soft skills perhaps are the interpersonal relationships, the ability to communicate, the ability to think critically. Okay, so competence is extremely important, but it's not enough. Okay, just with competence, you won't get far. You also need attitude. So we need to think about individuals holistically as a mix of competence and attitude, because attitude allows those competencies to work in the workplace, whether it's as a team or with a customer. So when we think about attitude, we want people that are committed, that are people that are respectful, that people are open-minded, that have a growth mindset, which means they are open to change and they are open to challenge. And those attitudes combined with the right competencies will become your star performers. But it's up to you to create those people, or at least find them and nurture them and help them grow within your business. So essentially what I'm saying with all these 7 laws is that over 60 years, over 100,000 CEOs have been through Vistage programs and have told us that these are the 7 things that have made them successful. So my encouragement to you is to look at your life and the way that you lead and see whether any of these are missing and see how you can enhance more of them. I'm going to stop the share and see if there are any questions on this, and I'm going to move to the second part. So if you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A chat. Okay, so we have a specific question here: is how do you convince customers on technology to change the way that they're doing things? Well, if we think about leadership here, you need to use the same principles of creating a vision for your customers. If your customers have a problem and they've come to you with this issue, the best way you can get them to change the way that they think is to inspire them. If you try and force them to change, or you argue on price or data or information, that is perhaps not going to be enough for them to be able to shift. So when we think about, in the context of leadership, how we get our customers to move with us, you need to think of them as your followers. You need to lead your customers. Customers are not there to sell to. Customers are your potential partners. They are the ones that are going to help you to grow your business. So you need to lead them too. So think of that a little bit differently than you perhaps would previously. Second question: what's the best way to approach a manager who is emotional to engage in difficult conversations? Now, for me, there are 3 ways of looking at influence and motivation. Yeah. So the first part is that I need to make sure that the people I am choosing are the right people as much as possible, but I need to also help them grow. In this example, we've got someone who is being emotional. Now, what does that mean? When we are emotional, typically what we're saying here is that we are not thinking straight. We're not thinking logically. And that is typically because someone does not feel safe. Right? So when someone is emotional, they are being triggered. Now, this is a neuroscientific response, okay? So it's a brain thing that when people are feeling scared or afraid or not trusted or not valued, they go into an emotional state. So as leaders, we need to make sure we create the right environment for people to be able to thrive, for them to feel safe, for them to feel valued, and for them to be able to understand that whilst work isn't easy and decisions may be tough on us, as a team, we will work together to be able to be successful. Now, each case has its own different perspectives, and you'd need to go into a bit of detail. But in principle, just remember that someone who is in an emotional state typically is someone who is stuck in their emotional brain, yeah, which is very different to their strategic or thinking brain, which allows us for them to be creative and accept change. family members in business. Again, family ties create relationships that are much deeper than the transactional approach that we might find if we're simply having employees. For me, we'll talk about this a bit later, Hamid. The idea is that you need to make sure that although they are family members, or maybe some of you have friends in your business, the roles and responsibilities need to be clearly defined and agreed. Okay, I may have family members in my business or friends and family working within my business. They are very clear about what is expected of them, what they are accountable for, and what their responsibilities are. And we have agreements, both psychological agreements, but also even written agreements, family constitution, for example, that actually declares what a family member can or cannot do within the business. They may be board members and therefore they are hands-off, they are non-executive, or they may be within the business and they are hands-on and they are executive. Either way, they have to be accountable. They have to follow the rules. You need to make sure that you get these things right, because that will allow you to have a happy and harmonious family life as well as business life. Okay, so there's some really good questions here, mostly around motivating people or getting people to move and follow. And hopefully the next part will help you. And we will go back to questions later. Just to quickly jump into Tatiana's question, do I need an MBA to lead successful business? Probably not. I've done my MBA. It was useful from an academic perspective. But actually, I learned far more from my Vistage members than I did from my professors at university. So surrounding yourself with good brains is probably more useful and more practical than perhaps following an MBA. Although having said that, I learned finance, I learned strategy, I learned value creation, I learned value proposition through my MBA. So these are very, very useful tools. Arguably, you could get these through separate courses. But MBAs obviously can be very useful, and that's why they're so popular. Starting a business while working a full-time job. Well, yes and no. I think you can start it up, but to actually give your full attention to a business, you need more time. And it really depends on what your aspiration is. If you're worried about leaving your job because of the finance, that can be understood, and therefore you need to create enough cushion or bridge to be able to allow you to transition. But if you stay too long doing your little business on the side part-time, what will happen is it will fizzle out. So you have to sometimes jump in and take the plunge. Let me pause on the questions for now, but we'll definitely come back to some of these because they're really good questions. Okay, so what are the 4 components that we find in businesses that are successful today? Now, we mostly work with SMEs, so mostly the types of business that you will be leading. Hopefully you are successful and you move and you become a big corporate, but the stuff we're talking about here is related to the agility and the impact of a leader in shaping the culture and the strategy for their business. So I separate those two because they are distinct. Culture is the collective behaviors, okay? So the way that the people within the organization behave on a day-to-day basis, that's your culture. Strategy is how you turn your vision into reality, okay? So strategy and culture are key components within a business. Now, what we find is that on those 2 levels, okay, these 4 elements are extremely important for or determiners of success. So if I look at a company, if I move into a board or I'm asked by a chairman or a CEO to go and help them with their business and help them scale, I will typically look at these 4 areas, which I'll explain briefly, and then we'll go back into more questions. The first part, okay, and we're going to use an acronym, okay, but the first part is flow. Now you might say that doesn't sound like a business term. But actually what flow means is that the organization has the ability to move efficiently, to get things done in a way that removes blocks. Okay, so if you look at this as a metaphor of a river, if I want to get downstream on my canoe or my kayak as fast as possible, the easiest way to do that is not to paddle faster, but to remove all the rocks that are causing all the turbulence in this river. So for us to find flow in organizations, or for us to find those blocks that create turbulence, will give us an indication of how those organizations function. So if you had to think about bureaucracy, for example, this is a block for flow. Yeah, it slows things down. If we have situations where people can't make decisions, they have to keep asking their manager, and their manager has to ask his manager, and his or her manager has to ask the CEO, that is a block. That stops flow. Okay, so when we talk about flow in business, what we're looking at is this ability to be able to have high levels of trust, which allow people to make decisions at their level according to their competence for the organization to move fast. Now, what does this mean? It means that there are certain components that you need to put in as a leader within your business for flow to happen. Number one is we need to make sure that people are always challenged according to their competence. Okay, you might be surprised, but boredom is one of the biggest killers of flow. So people who are a little bit under pressure, not stressed out or burnt out, but a little bit under pressure, will actually perform better and will get more flow. So we need to look at what are the competencies of my people and how can I give them just enough responsibility to get them under pressure. Okay, and that's where people perform at their best. How do you know how much pressure to give them? Trial and error. You give them some responsibility, you see how they cope. If they cope well, you give them more. If they don't, you dial it back. So this challenge and skills ratio, yeah, is very, very important for us to get people in flow. Flow is also a mental state, okay? When we're in flow, we're at our best, we're in the zone, we're playing as best as we can, we're being our best self. So organizing that within your business, whether it's your culture or your strategy, the strategy is you remove the blocks, the culture is get people to stretch themselves and get out of their comfort zone, you will get more flow. Okay. Other things you can do to improve social flow is make sure that there is transparency and openness. Yeah, there is no suspicion or grapevine gossip. These are all blockers for flow. Flow needs to also work in communication. The way you speak, the way you act, those need to be transparent. People need to see you and understand exactly what you mean by what you say, and you need to be able to demonstrate that in the way that you behave. So flow is about linear, transparency, openness, movement in the right direction, constant pushing the pace, challenging yourself and others to be able to be your best self. Okay, so I am always looking for these components within an organization, because if I can fix some of these blocks, I'm going to accelerate that business much more quickly than if I had to simply look at it from a numbers perspective. The second part is impact. What does this mean? What gets measured gets done. Which means that if I can measure the impact of what I'm doing, it's going to gamify in my mind and release that little bit of dopamine for me to want to be excited about doing more. Think about generating business. You go through the effort and the struggle to be able to prepare a pitch. You go into around the deal table and you close the sale or you make the deal. That gives you a number that now is your benchmark. Now you want to beat it. The next time round, you want to get more and more and more. And that's how impact works. When we measure something, we've set the bar, and it allows us to be able to push to try and always achieve more. Impact is also not just from a numbers perspective, things like sales or revenue, but impact is also the difference you make to your team. Do you have engagement scores in your business that measures how happy your people are? Do you have NPS scores to measure how happy your customers are? These are important metrics that allow us to measure our impact. Impact, therefore, has to be measured for us to make sense of it. What if you have someone in your organization, perhaps, that is sitting behind a desk doing bureaucratic work, office work, administration? How do you get them motivated? You need to figure out how you're going to get them to feel the value that they are giving to the business. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult for them to be motivated. So impact can also be given through feedback. If we give feedback about the importance of the people and their roles within the company, that motivates them for them to push further, to stretch themselves, and to be better. Okay, so it's important that you measure impact. Don't just simply measure your revenue stream. As much as you may be tempted, because that's the most important thing when you're starting up, and cash flow is extremely important when you're starting up, also measure other aspects of impact, especially your customers and your employees. Engagement score, NPS score. Very, very key. Roles and responsibilities. We touched on this a little bit earlier when we talked about family businesses. Companies that, even if they are small, have an organizational chart that shows who is responsible for what, typically work better than others who are trying to do a bit of everything. Okay. Now, this does not mean that within my responsibility, I am not helpful to my colleagues, because by saying that's not my job, then obviously you disrupt flow. So when we talk about roles and responsibilities, we're talking not about job descriptions, we're talking about roles and responsibilities. So if I am responsible for the performance of my team, I need to make sure my team are being trained, are being developed, and are hitting their targets. But if I'm responsible as part of a management team to make decisions, then I also need to put my time and effort into helping other people's departments. If I am the CEO, am I acting as a role model? Or am I just taking out my emotional state and my bad days on my employees? Roles and responsibilities are important because they allow people to delegate. The biggest block to go from startup to scale up, is the ability to delegate. I meet many CEOs, hundreds of CEOs, who tell me, I would grow my business faster, but I'm too busy. And that typically means two things. Either they don't have good people around them who can take responsibility, or they don't trust their people to give them responsibility. It's one of those two. You need to know which one it is for you. Roles and responsibilities means that you do your job as the CEO, but you don't do the job of the finance person. You don't do the job of the operator. You don't do the job of the secretary. You do your job. That's your responsibility. And your responsibility is to make decisions, to take the responsibility of pressure and heat, and to perhaps bring in business if you're typically a startup. So you'll be the person that's bringing the clients and the business towards, or doing the deals. Okay, so roles and responsibilities, extremely clear. Everyone in the organization should have this. It's not a job description with a list of tasks, it's responsibilities. The last part is excellence. What we find is the top organizations are the ones that are continuously learning. They're continuously trying new things. They are trying to find ways to make things better, to, as Stephen Covey said, sharpen the saw, which means that whilst they are using their tools, whilst they're using their products, whilst they're using their services, whilst they are providing the effort and the energy to their clients, they're constantly finding time to improve those services and products. They're constantly finding time to improve their processes within the business. They're constantly finding ways to innovate and to create whilst still doing business. Not when they're on holiday, or not when they're on break, or when business is slow, all the time. So top companies are the ones that have rules like, for example, 5% of every employee's time is dedicated towards training and development. Those are companies, learning organizations that take this seriously, and they are typically the ones that start to edge above their competitors. Through Vistage, what we found is organizations that follow these rules and apply the 7 laws of leadership, typically they will outpace their industry by double. Okay, so 2.2% growth, 2.2 times growth as their best competitors by using these principles and the 7 laws of leadership. So if you think about it, we have 2 easy or relatively easy ways of understanding culture and strategy, putting them into these acronyms. Here we can see the word fire, lighting the fire. Organizations that are on fire, we know that analogy, are at their best, are flying. These are organizations that have these components within their strategies and within their culture. So for you as leaders, for you looking for growth, you may be tempted to spend a lot of your time looking at your product, your service, and getting deals. It's very important that you take time out to be able to reflect on the state of play. What's missing? Are people clear about what is going on? Is your vision communicated well? And how can you make sure that you have this buzz, this culture, this excitement within your team to be able to stretch themselves and get out of the comfort zone and move faster, because that's what's going to give you the edge to be able to succeed in entrepreneurial life. So I hope those were useful insights. We are going to spend 10 minutes now answering some of those questions. So please keep them coming. Some are in the chat and some are also in the Q&A. I'll do my best to see as many of those as I can. Okay. Here's a very interesting question. How do you build a business from scratch? Most businesses start with just an idea. Now, the reality here is that obviously life is complex and business is complex. However, there are certain standards that you need to achieve, milestones that you need to achieve to be able to build a business. And the most important thing at first is your value proposition. Yeah. So if you're starting from scratch, the question you have to ask is, what is your value proposition? What are you going to do differently that anybody else in the market is already doing? Because if you're just going to copy without any differentiation, you're not going to really make any difference. So your value proposition is extremely important. If you're struggling, if your sales have plateaued, look at your value proposition. Has it become stagnant? Do you need to change it? Do you need to recreate it or reinvent it? Okay, so we've got someone here who's in leadership and who's looking at, a situation of burnout. Burnout is the accumulation of stress. So if we think about burnout as something that is happening to us, it's usually happening to us over a long period of time. Okay, so we notice it when it starts to affect us physiologically, when you can't sleep properly, when your mind is constantly racing, when you lose your appetite, when you lose your energy, when you're tired all the time. These are signs of burnout, but that means that your problem has been there for some time. All right, so if you are in that position, whether you are the CEO or you're a manager within an organization, you need to figure out what's going on. And typically what happens is that your challenge skills ratio is out of sync. Okay, so you're either doing things that are either too boring or out of your competence level. Okay, so we want to make sure that our competence and attitude and the responsibilities that we carry, okay, think about the FIRE model here, are the same. So the challenge skills ratio helps flow, and also roles and responsibilities dictate what we should take as responsibility. Okay, so if I am taking too much responsibility, then I'm going to burn out. If I'm getting bored and not using my talents and my skills, I'm going to burn out. The sweet spot is somewhere in between. Okay, so write those things down, write your competencies, write your attitude, write the things that you're good at, write your responsibilities and gauge them. And if you don't have objectivity, find a mentor who can help you to be able to determine whether you are either on the lower level, not challenging yourself enough, or too stretched and stressed out. And that's probably what's causing burnout. And it takes time. Burnout doesn't happen overnight. So questions, mentors. So essentially mentors are people that you look up to and respect. They don't necessarily have to be experts in the field that you are working in. You want to have someone who has experience and who has something that you look for in yourself. Okay, I'd like to be better at decision making. Who can I find that demonstrates this skill set? What you'll also find is that sometimes people are, like I said, people are typically very generous to help. I've reached out to people who I never in a million years thought they would even answer my call or my email, because they were like top CEOs in big corporates. And they did. And they said, yes, let's have a coffee. And I was very surprised. But then I realized the more I did that, actually, it's not a surprise. People who are accomplished want to share. They want to share their experience and their knowledge. It's up to you how you access them, and access them with humility and respect. And I suspect that you'll get some really good feedback from some top people. At Vistage, we meet on a monthly basis, and we are 12 members, 12 CEOs, 12 business owners, and each chapter, we have chapters in Dubai, we have chapters all around the world, 35 countries. And you can join one of those groups, and that will allow you to be able to make sure that every month you are spending 4 hours of your day with 12 amazing CEOs who have lots of experience, who have made mistakes and learned from those, that you can apply their learning in your business and save you some of the mistakes and the pain that they've gone through, because you can learn from their mistakes instead of making yours. So that's where Vistage is helpful. I was a member of Vistage when I was a CEO, and I found it extremely useful to have some really top brains in the room. Yes, you're paying a membership fee. It's part of the cost of doing business. But the money I saved by avoiding certain mistakes, by having those peers, was really good return on investment. What odds will you face starting up a business? Well, I think the whole point of joining or becoming an entrepreneur is personality. Yeah, if you wanted a predictable life, you would get a job and you would know exactly what to expect from one day to the next, and there would be no surprises. People who choose to become entrepreneurs, people who choose to start their own business, are looking forward to a journey of challenge. And, you know, with the analogy of climbing a mountain earlier, you're going to have weather. You're going to have paths that are blocked. You're going to have people that get in the way. There are going to be rules that allow you or don't allow you to climb that mountain. You have to figure out a way around them. And that's why I choose to be an entrepreneur, because it's exciting. It's interesting. You're challenging yourself. You're learning. You're discovering skills that you never thought you had because of these challenges that you are facing every day. The most important thing is that you embrace them with an open mind. The growth mindset in entrepreneurship is key. Every problem needs to be seen as a challenge, and every challenge is an opportunity to grow and learn. So you have my contacts in the chat. Please do reach out. LinkedIn is my preferred way of communicating. However, there are links to our website. Up Your Level is our academy and coaching and mentoring programs, and Vistage is our peer groups. And it was great to be in the room with you guys for this short time. I love the questions you've asked, and I really appreciate the feedback that you are giving me at this point. So really, really appreciate it. And yeah, hopefully we'll be able to bump into each other at some point in the future. Good luck.